Hello, and welcome to Before the Arch, the podcast that centers around the lives and narratives of students at Northwestern. This week's episode engages with students who hold identities Black, Indigenous, or people of color, BIPOC for short. It's important to keep in mind that their voice is not represented in this conversation that nonetheless deserve a seat at the table. Before jumping in, we wanted to have a moment of silence for Jacob Blake, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others whose lives have been seriously affected or ended by police brutality and racism present in the United States today. Thank you. All that being said, let's jump right in. Hi, my name is Andrew Golden. I'm on the board of directors. I'm a director of Medill, and I'm also on the IM team. And this is our next episode of Before the Arch, a podcast about the BIPOC narratives at Northwestern and navigating that experience. I am a senior studying journalism and African American studies, and I'm from Reisterstown, Maryland.
Hi, I'm Kandace. I'm a junior at Northwestern, and I'm double majoring in theater and creative writing and minoring in film and media studies, and I'm from Omaha, Nebraska.
Hi, I'm Valen. I'm one of the members of the board of directors for Wildcat Welcome. I'm the academic person for School of Comm on board. I'm also a rising senior theater major.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I am a rising fourth year as well. Wow, that's so weird to say. I'm from Potomac, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C., and I'm studying biomedical engineering and psychology.
I just want to ask you about, obviously, your transition to Northwestern. When it came to your racial identity, how did Wildcat Welcome Northwestern change your relationship with your identity? And what was it going in, and how did it change through Wildcat Welcome?
I think thinking of Wildcat Welcome in particular, just the TND, the DNI TND, and just the TNDs in general, I think got me thinking a lot about my identity, both like as a woman and as a Latinx person. I came from South Florida, which is super diverse, especially with Latinx people. So I wasn't used to the idea of being like a minority in a big population. So I think the TND first, and also just the experience of Wildcat Welcome and meeting these students and stuff really made me realize that I was in a completely different environment. I think Wildcat Welcome was a time I was starting to make those realizations that there weren't as many people like me on campus. So I had to kind of like carve out those spaces on my own.
So yeah, I identify as Black African American, and coming to Northwestern, I actually was more aware of my race, and I was really excited to see how people wanted to engage in dialogue about it and talk about it. And because I think from where I came, like when I was at home, a lot of people were colorblind, and here I think they're color conscious, which I like more and willing to engage in dialogue with it. And I've been able to have conversations about my race with more people of my race, which I think has been really good for me too.
To preface this, I'm from a pretty homogenous area back home, and at my high school, we had really kind of engaged in dialogue surrounding our identity. So a lot of the dialogues that we were engaging in during Wildcat Welcome were very familiar to me, but I think that all throughout high school, I had kind of engaged in them, but not really understood what they meant in terms of my personal identity. My high school was very Black and white, and being an Asian American, I feel like I didn't really understand how I fit into race relations when they came boiling down to a Black and white issue, which was primarily what my high school, kind of engaged in conversations about. So coming into Wildcat Welcome, I think I was a little bit nervous in terms of knowing that, I had sort of a background in talking about these topics, but also had a lot to explore myself. And I think I didn't really honestly become very vulnerable during Wildcat Welcome until later. I had joined some student organizations that really helped me understand my own identity in terms of being an Asian American and what that meant. But I think Wildcat Welcome does a really amazing job at understanding that people come from very different backgrounds in terms of engaging in these dialogues and really meets you where you are. So I felt like they were really interesting to kind of, I guess, see where people come from in terms of their background and understand that, everyone is bringing a lot to the table and really being able to hear what your peers have to say.
Yeah, awesome. And you talked about, obviously, transitioning to Northwestern, you found clubs and places where you felt more part of the community and that sort of thing. So just bouncing off that, where did you feel like you found support in the Northwestern community when it came to your race? And how did you feel supported during your transition?
I honestly was really hesitant to join any clubs right away that were surrounding my identity as an Asian American. I feel like it was something that, quite honestly, coming from my high school, especially being in a very white community, I was always on the inside looking out and never really engaged in that aspect of my identity. And it wasn't until I went to the club fair and one of my friends really pushed me to sign up for the Chinese Students Association, put my name down on the list, and was really hesitant, to be honest, because I felt like I was signing up for a club that, I don't know, I felt like I didn't really connect with that part of my identity as much as others. I almost felt like a fraud for like putting my name down, saying that it was something that I was interested in, because I really wasn't sure. I went to all the activities and I really just loved engaging with the people in the community. And I think I didn't realize it at the time, but especially with people from your same racial background, you really identify with a lot of the aspects of, for example, growing up, the food that you eat, your culture and family background and all of that. And especially being away from home and being someone who's very family oriented, I really missed my home. And I think having that community right away that really reminded me of the feeling of being at home and in a community was really amazing. So I really delved into that and honestly was able to explore my identity through that student org. And I've really loved it. And I think it's been an incredibly valuable experience in my Northwestern career.
It's been interesting coming to Northwestern. For me, I came into a more diverse community than I was in. And so it's been interesting, number one, to have people to communicate with about the things I'm experiencing, like being around more Black people who share my identity and being able to talk to them. But also, it's been interesting coming into the community, to a community where I feel like mostly people are willing to engage with race and racism, as opposed to Nebraska, where it was more of a hush-hush, we don't want to talk about this. Like I said earlier, it was more colorblind. Everyone's the same, it's fine. And coming here, it's more of like okay, we acknowledge our differences and we're going to talk about them and have dialogues and work through it.
Yeah, I definitely relate to the point you're talking about. I also came from like a private school that was predominantly white, probably like 90% white. And I think in the same way, I don't think it was fully, they weren't willing to have the conversations, but I don't think people had the vocab and the ability to have those conversations in the right way, because I felt like there was like a baseline knowledge, like you wanted to get to a certain extent just to like acknowledge, like, you know, that they were doing the right thing, but not really figuring out how to best support their students. So I definitely feel and understand what you were talking about just now about coming from a private school to somewhere like Northwestern that's a little bit more diverse than the private schools we probably grew up in.
I definitely found support just in like other Latinx friends was a big thing. Just people that I felt like I had that connection with and who I could talk about, you know, maybe like the more difficult parts about it with. I also, the end of my freshman year, got together with a Latina friend of mine and we started our own theater group that was kind of like dedicated to POC artists. So Northwestern really gives you the tools to carve out your own space if you want to do that and you feel like there isn't a space on campus for you. It's totally possible to spearhead it and do it on your own, which is something I was really appreciative of. And it was much easier process than I thought. So it was definitely really uplifting to be able to lead and create that community at Northwestern.
I think another aspect of Northwestern that's kind of slept on is the ability to be able to take classes relating to your race as well, or like allow you to like learn about your history or how things work. I did not come in expecting to do that. Now I'm an FA, I'm double major. I do like as my second major as well as journalism. I didn't expect that to be an aspect of my identity. That obviously something I would do as a part of me, but I didn't know how much I'd be able to explore it during Northwestern. And I want to ask you, talking about your experiences, do you feel like you're taking classes? Do you feel like you've kind of like opened yourself up to learn more about yourself, your race, and how you kind of fit into society?
I think it's hard sometimes, especially being in McCormick, because you kind of get stuck in this engineering bubble, for lack of better words. But I think in general, the ability to take classes outside of your major is really amazing. I also took an intro to sociology class, and part of that class was also talking about the social construction of race and what it means to have defined race in the way that, for example, the United States does, which is somewhat unique to a lot of countries in how we engage in conversations about about race. Yeah, I think also engaging in with those professors that have a background in talking about these, write books and, do their research on these types of topics was so cool. And especially for me being someone who I think has kind of been exposed to these topics for a while, especially during high school, it was really awesome to see what it looks like in a classroom setting, and especially getting to delve into more like concrete literature supporting these arguments and being able to engage with classmates all throughout different majors and schools at Northwestern and getting to expand, the topics that I'm learning about. It was a really awesome opportunity.
For sure, for sure. After your first year at Northwestern, what was it like to go home, and what were the differences that you noticed in coming home?
Home definitely feels very, very different that first time, I think, because you're realizing all these things and then you go back home with all these realizations and you're just not starting your transition, and you kind of have to balance what your relationship is with your family and your friends now, and whether that's changed because people start to change in college. So I feel like it was definitely feeling different and sometimes a little out of place that I had to get used to. And I think throughout the years it gets way, way easier just because you find yourself a little more, you realize your priorities, what people you want to keep in your life. So it's definitely a process, and I think it's normal for the first time to feel a little weird going back home.
So one thing about coming to Northwestern was that it's also coming to Chicago, which is also different than Omaha, Nebraska. So, in general, even on the streets of Evanston, even when I was able to go into Chicago, I just saw different people than I did when I went home. And I remember the first time I went home for winter break, I stepped off the plane and I was like, I am not in Chicago anymore. It was it felt so different. It looked so different. I was more aware of my race because I felt more unique than I did here, but not in a great way. So it was interesting. And it was interesting talking to a lot of my friends who stayed in Omaha. They had learned a lot too. They had gone to classes and we had all developed a vocabulary, but we did in different locations. And so I think that I did feel a difference in the way that we talked about identity still. And I honestly felt like I was supplying a lot of they weren't asking questions, I was telling, which I think is something different than being here, is that if I say something, people will ask a question about it and be curious about it and my experiences, versus at home, it's I say, hey, this happened to me, or hey, I'm upset that you said this and I feel like we should maybe talk about it. And they're like, oh, haha, whatever, or something like that. Yeah, it's definitely different. And it feels different every time I go home. But yeah.
So, Valen, I want to touch on something that you asked. You mentioned kind of feeling out of place a little bit. Can you describe a little bit more what that felt like for you and what you mean by that?
Yeah, it just felt really like I still hadn't fully transitioned into being at Northwestern, but everyone was asking me all these questions. Oh my God, you're in college now. How's it going? It must be great. So there was a feeling of I need to perform a little bit. I need to lie about how college was going, which I think made me feel really alienated because I wasn't really being honest and vulnerable with my family and my friends about what the difficulties of transitioning that are totally normal, yet it's so normalized to just pretend everything's happy, especially with social media and everything, and seeing other people having a great time and feeling like maybe you're not having as great a time as they're having in those pictures. It's complicated. It's just so many mixed feelings that you don't feel like you can express that make you feel out of place.
I also want to ask, for new students coming in who maybe are in a similar situation or different situation to you, what advice would you give for them to a new student who holds the identity similar to yours?
I think to that student, I would say you always reach out to the Black community if you need assistance. Just know that you are not navigating this space alone, and that there are other people who are going through the same exact thing or something very similar. I spent a lot of time freshman year and even sophomore year feeling like I was experiencing things were happening to me as a Black woman on campus, and I thought, I just have to take this, and that's just how it is. And that's not how it is. You don't have to stand for anything, and you don't have to stand for anything alone. You've got a whole community behind you who are willing to take action and support you in any way you can. And also, I would tell them to take care of themselves specifically as well, because it's difficult.
Prioritize friendships that truly feel like you're getting something out of it, and not in a superficial way, but that really feel fulfilling. And that's going to be hard to find at first. But especially with identity, just like people of your same identity, it hits different as a friendship when you can really bond over that and talk frankly about your experiences. So people you can be open and honest with so that you can process everything that's going on. I think it's so easy when you start off college to settle for like just easy friendships. The first person you meet becomes your best friend. But it's okay if it takes a while to feel like you made like a real connection with somebody, because it takes time. And when you do, it's really rewarding. So don't settle for just a friend group just to have a friend group. Really like look for those people you can be open and honest with.
Yeah, I would say to keep an open mind and to push the boundary of uncomfortability. I think college is a really amazing time because you're surrounded by people who are quite similar to you, but also very different in many different ways. And I think it's a really amazing time to be able to listen to other people and their perspectives and meet them where they are. I think it's also really important to, especially coming in, not assume things about people, because it's important to acknowledge that everyone comes from a very different background, and race is a very difficult topic to talk about sometimes. Most of the time, I would say. It's important to assume people's best intentions and know that, everyone is coming from a place where they want to learn and they're just talking from their own experiences, and that might be different from yours, but that's not invalidating of what they have to say or their thoughts and opinions. But I guess to sum it up, to just really take advantage of your time at college, at Northwestern, and just be able to talk to the people around you and learn from them.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming on. It was really fun having you guys, and thank you for listening to this podcast, and keep looking out for Wildcat Welcome content coming in the future. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and we hope that you can see yourself as part of the Northwestern community, no matter your ethnic or racial identity. If you'd like to connect with resources, the Black House and Multicultural Student Affairs departments are linked in the notes. See you next time.